Welcome to From College to College. This podcast explores innovative teaching, learning, and quality in further education and community college, with lessons from both sides of the pond. Whether you're a lecturer, a leader, or a lifelong learner, this is your conversation. I'm Dr. Lauran Kerr-Heraly. I'm American, I'm British, and I've been involved in college education for over 20 years. Each episode, I share my own experiences as a history professor, innovation fellow, and quality lead. I also sit down with amazing college professionals from the UK and the US to highlight incredible practice in the college sector. We'll talk about what's working and why, and give you creative ideas to employ on your campus straight away. Let's get started. Today, we are speaking with Marina Aminy. Marina, welcome to From College to College.
Hello, Lauran. Nice to see you.
Thanks for coming on the show. So I want to start by asking sort of what you're doing right now and how you ended up in college education.
All right. Well, I don't know. I think it's in my genes. Both of my parents were teachers. I was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, and both my parents were actually teachers in Kabul. We came here when I was a child. I learned English as a second language, moved through the educational system, became a high school teacher, much like my parents. Went on to get my graduate education and coming back, and I taught graduate school. I've taught undergraduates. And I sort of stumbled into the California community college system, where I have worked for about 15 years now. It's the largest educational organization in the entire world, made up of about 116 colleges, and we serve around 2.2 million students annually. So that's where I've currently landed. I've had roles as a faculty member, as a dean. I'm currently an associate vice chancellor at one of the home districts, and we serve the entire system through a process called the California Virtual Campus. And I'll talk more about that, but essentially it's kind of some shared technologies and some course sharing.
That's a huge system, but that's one of the things that community colleges can be really big or really small, right? So I'm interested to hear more about what you're doing there. But as the show focuses on college education, why do you think community college is so unique and so important? Why not go into higher ed yourself, or why not stay teaching high school? Why community college?
Community college is this glue that keeps, I think, all of the other systems together. I have worked at the K-12, as I mentioned. I've also taught at a CSU. I was a full-time tenure track faculty member at San Jose State University, which is our state college system here in California, our state university system. My degrees are all from a University of California, UC Berkeley. And I always come back to the California community colleges. It has the most open access. We really meet students where they are. We accept literally everyone. And whatever your goal is, whether it's to transfer and get the four-year degree or go on to graduate school, which was mine, or maybe it's to get a career technical degree and work in health information science, or you want to become an administrative assistant, or you want to become a cosmetologist or an esthetician. Whatever your life goals are, there's a path for you in the California community colleges, which is why I just love the inclusiveness and the openness of the system, and which is why I see myself staying here really until I retire.
I love that because the way that you put it as there's a path for everyone within this system is really powerful because if we're really true to our inclusive values in college, we have to provide a pathway for everyone and it has to be clear. And maybe they start here, maybe we don't offer their end goal, but it's a nice thing to be able to say, you can start here, you can get a really good solid foundation and we'll help you get to where you want to go, whether that's industry experience or connecting you with a community or further education beyond that.
Exactly. There's a path for everyone. And if you are retired and you want to come back for lifelong learning, there are community education courses around bird watching and other hobbies that you can learn and pick up on that can keep our older learners kind of engaged and active and part of a community for learning. So again, really from cradle to the end of your life cycle, I love that community colleges offer you something to keep you engaged and excited about learning.
That's awesome, and my partner is a birder, and I wouldn't say that he's at the end of his life, but he would love to take a class at your community college about birding.
I confess to having an app that identifies the songs of certain birds. So I will go out. My son and I like to listen for the birds. And if I like a particular chirp, we'll try to guess which one it is. But now the AI app will tell you which bird you're hearing.
Mhm. We love the Merlin app in our house. Yeah.
I've got Song Sleuth.
Song Sleuth. Okay, I'll have to try that
Yes.
one. So you are in an online college. So can you tell us sort of what that looks like? Because online education, of course, has exploded. I mean, I remember back in secondary school, I took a college correspondence course and they would mail me the work and I would fill it out and I would mail it back. And there was no touch points between myself and the instructor. It was a very different game. So the way that we have expanded online education is amazing, but it also obviously comes with some challenges. So can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I'm the executive director for the California Virtual Campus. It sounds like we're our own college, and a lot of people think we are, but we're actually not. And essentially, we ask this question in our system of, are we putting too much pressure on every single college in our system? Because we have 116 colleges, so some are very small, and they have, 1,000 students, and they're in a rural, remote part of California. Not all of California looks like Los Angeles. And others truly are in places like Los Angeles or the San Francisco Bay Area, where there are multiple colleges within a stone's throw, and students and faculty have a lot of options around them. So we kind of thought, is there a way for us to leverage this huge size of our system to help students complete their degrees and programs and goals in a more timely manner? And that's how the CVC, or the California Virtual Campus, was envisioned. Previous to the CVC, if a student at one of those remote colleges, let's say Lassen College, which is very, very north, it's almost Oregon in California, a student in Lassen College can't find a class that they need to graduate or to transfer. They have to wait around and hope that Lassen offers it maybe next semester, maybe next year. But let's say they found a fully online class that they need in Los Angeles. Obviously, they cannot drive the 13 hours down to Los Angeles. That's how long it would take if they drove to take the class once a week. That's impossible. So then we kind of make them apply. They have to fill out a whole application. They have to wait for LA to accept them. They have to do this whole thing called provisioning, which is creating an email address, an ID, and permission to register. They have to learn to use the whole portal that LA is using that looks different from Lassen's portal. It's a lot of cognitive burden, right, that we place on a student to take that one class that they need to graduate or to transfer. So the CVC said, what if we took everybody's online classes and we put them on a single place, and we just allowed students to more freely take those classes without filling an application? So that now leverages the power of our system. So we did that, and it's been very successful. Last year, we had over 100,000 fully online courses offered on our platform. And they're not our classes, they're the classes of the community colleges that we put on there in a single site. Students can search for them, and guess what? They have more choices. They can look for a zero textbook cost, for example, or they can look for the same class, the same transferable class that's being offered for 4 units versus 3 units. They want the 3 units because they'll pay less in tuition. And we also made it easy for them to use their financial aid, to get transcripts afterward, and really just removing these barriers. So that's kind of the core of course sharing, is how do we remove all of these administrative, bureaucratic barriers that we have at our schools and make it easy for students to take advantage of the enormous size of our system and the entire inventory of our system.
That's really innovative, and I can see so many benefits to that. I like the way you put it as a cognitive burden being a barrier to learning because I myself went to community college, and there was one year that I was, I think I went to 3 different colleges because I sort of registered late. My family had moved to the area shortly before, and everything was full, and so I was driving hours, just to take my one English class at one college, and then history was an hour away at some other college. So this
Yes.
is this is a really innovative way to address some of those problems. And I can also see it really benefiting learners for whom English is not their first language and their families are trying to help them get the classes that they need and they're talking to advisors and whatnot, but they can have the in-house support of their home campus with the benefit of a lot more reach for the classes themselves.
Exactly. And these classes are all fully online. So that scenario that you described that is unfortunately very common for our students, would really be limited. Students can also choose between synchronous and asynchronous courses. So if they prefer live online versus just asynchronous on their own, those are also filters that we provide on our site. Online education has unlocked the future for a lot of students who are traditionally left out of the loop. I mean, really, traditional education was designed to serve white males that had money. This is sort of the core of how the American educational system came about. And so now we've really opened the door through online education to single parents, to people who are working full time, to people with disabilities. We have a very outspoken former California Community College student, Jessica Lopez, who was born without arms and legs. And she talks about the enormous strain that it puts on her to have to navigate a physical campus and how she really relies on online education to get her courses and to graduate. So there are a number of students that were really locked out of traditional education that now we really are opening that door back for them through our programs.
That's amazing. I teach both synchronous and asynchronous online classes. So some I don't actually ever see the students in a virtual classroom setting, and then some it's very much on time. And some of them really couldn't even make it to a synchronous online class because they have too many caring responsibilities. They're working, there are a variety of reasons why they can't make it even to that scenario. So being able to filter and being able to choose a scenario that actually will accommodate their needs is really important, particularly for removing those barriers to learning. So, in the online world, there are a lot of challenges, one being agentic AI. So, can you talk about how you view agentic AI in your setting and how you deal with those challenges?
Yeah, this is obviously a whole other podcast topic that we could get into just on agentic AI. But essentially, what we're talking about is not the AI of 2023. This is not your 2023 Chat GPT AI problem that educators are confronting and creating policies around. Students are no longer cutting and pasting your essay prompt into Chat GPT and getting an essay, because that actually involved at least some interaction from a student. Now a student can deploy an AI agent in their learning management system. And in our system, we use the learning management system called Canvas. It's owned by Instructor. So all of our colleges use Canvas. Now I can deploy an agent and say, hey, agent, go into my 4 Canvas classes, scan for assignments due, discussions due, and assessments that are due. Use the rubrics and content provided in the LMS for information, and complete them and submit them on my behalf. And then that's done. I just snapped my finger for those who can't see me. That's done in about 3 or 4 seconds, depending on the speed of your computer. So they're no longer cutting and pasting or even interacting, right? It's a little bit scary for faculty. For me, I was a former English teacher. This is a very challenging time for English faculty, the humanities, the social sciences, anything involving essays and writing. This is fundamentally changing the way we are able to teach online.
And, as much as I think I AI proof my assignments, someone will come up with some way to use agentic AI to complete it, right? So, how do you encourage online instructors to approach this topic? If it's going to be impossible for us to ignore it. I had a guest on recently who talked about using AI to sort of offload cognitive overload for teachers, but then not take the human side out of it. But that is a difficult balance, even for ourselves. So, how do we teach that? How do you encourage instructors to deal with it?
Well, when we talk about AI agents, we're really talking about 2 different scenarios typically, right? There's the one scenario where there are bad actors. I don't like to call them fake students because they're not really students, but there's bad actors in our learning management system. They're using AI agents to act like humans and take our classes, but their goal is not to cheat in the class. Their goal is actually to get through a certain point that we call census in our system. And once they're in the course a certain number of days, they qualify for financial aid. So it's a financial aid fraud scheme, really. And that's why the agents are deployed in our online courses. This is a major problem. It's costing many systems millions of dollars. In fact, later today, I'm speaking at a community college in Nevada, where they've invited me to talk about fraudulent enrollments and ghost students. So this is a major problem that typically your IT team and your admissions and records teams will work together to resolve. The second scenario, which I think is more pressing for faculty if we're focusing on teaching and learning, is a real student in your class deploying this agent to complete work. That's something that's a little bit more challenging, but really what I would do in my class if I were back in the classroom is requiring low stakes but synchronous or identity confirmed interactions in the first week. So what does that look like? A video check-in, a short oral introduction, a live discussion. So moving away from fully asynchronous to some elements of like a live verification. And the students are no longer really surprised by live verification requirements because I promise you, your IT, if they're trying to stay on top of these fake fraudsters, they're also requiring live verification. So that's like one strategy. The other idea is to release content very incrementally so that it becomes hard for the agent to go in and do things on a mass scale. And a third idea is to use identity linked artifacts, so video reflections, handwritten uploads, like annotate this piece of writing, take a picture with your phone, and then upload it. That's a little bit harder to fake with an AI agent. And it's also really difficult for fraud rings as well with the first scenario because their goal is to cheat the system at scale. So it's very difficult and cumbersome for them to do a bunch of handwritten uploads if like their goal is to try to cheat 100 classes out of financial aid. So those are just some strategies, but really bringing back a human element to subvert the use of AI in the classroom.
And I think that's my major takeaway is because I was just thinking as you were talking, oh no, there's a whole robot fraud ring inside my learning
Yes.
management system. And we can get weighed down by that. But it is really the human interaction that's most important. And I know, for example, in my history classes, I've gone to doing video presentations and I say, you can't use an AI voice. I want to hear your voice. I want to see your face. And it does make a difference because they put a little bit more creativity into it. It means a little bit more trying to make the assignments relevant to them as much as possible. And we have discussions too about not giving away your power to AI because it's all fine and well to use it for maybe boring tasks that make this information into a table or something, or even for instructors for us to use it to help with planning or grading. But it's a whole different thing to give that power away, that creative power away to agentic AI to come up with ideas and to learn skills. Because I tell my students, I am not teaching a class on how to use AI. I'm teaching a class on history and how to make you into a historian and to teach you skills. So that
Yeah,
class exists, but it's not mine.
I love what you said about just normalizing the discussion of AI, right? Or what we would call metacognition, talking about AI and how we use it. So requiring a disclosure as part of your assignment, asking students, what AI tools did you use? Did you change or reject any of the AI generated content and why? What was your initial answer versus your revised answer after you use AI? What misconceptions did you correct? Basically the research shows us that student perceptions and behavior improves when we have this explicit ethical framing. I have a son who is in college, and he recently sent me his essay to look over for a course that he was taking on Asian American literature. And I could tell just based on the way it was written that he had written it because there were some errors, there's some typos, there's some, but it was overall pretty well written. And I said, oh, you didn't use AI to write this? And he said, no, I'm a good writer. He took some pride in that, and I love that. He was proud enough to write that first draft himself, and really he's proud of being a good writer and having the ability to do that. How do we instill that sort of pride in ownership of the writing process or the thinking process in all of our students? How did that happen with my kid? Probably because he's graduating soon, but he sort of missed that whole AI use earlier on in his high school. But how do we do that at scale with our students? That would be a question that I have.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because I had another guest on recently also who talked about metacognition. And I love this because I'm very interested in neuroscience and how people think and how our brains help us with executive function or control executive function. And when we think about how we learn and why, from the instructor's perspective, I think it is on us to be really explicit with our expectations, but also with how they should do the assignment. So what I see is students putting maybe directions into agentic AI and saying, what does this professor actually want me to do?
Yes.
When when the human element could say, actually, can you just have a quick virtual conversation with me and I'll explain it to you? What don't you understand? But they're shy to do that. So it's creating the type of relationship that would allow for those conversations to happen.
I agree. I think it's an outlet for students who are not normally comfortable in social settings. And I don't want to put like stereotypes on generations, but I have two kids in their early 20s, and they would rather do anything other than talk to a real human being. So whether it's ordering food or correcting an accounting error or dealing with a bill or something, they would rather pay the bill that they know they shouldn't be charged rather than pick up the phone and talk to an actual human being. It's just, this is the generational trends that I'm seeing, at least with my own couple of kids that I'm around. So you're right. Students like these, they're not willing to engage with the faculty member out of just whatever their preferences are socially. So how do we use AI in a positive way as an outlet for them to get those questions answered? I love this point that you're making.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I've done in my classes is also to require that students attend a live help session. So that could be a virtual tour of the library. It could be office hours with myself. It could be going to a virtual campus event, something like that, so that they do have to interact with people and get assistance in some way. So I find that that does help remove some of the barriers of communication so that they're at least interacting positively with the services that we have to offer, but also taking that next sort of social step of, okay, well, I showed up and I had my camera on and I didn't die and I asked a question and it was fine. So it's scaffolding those skills as well.
Yes, all of our students do need to learn to function in a social setting. Eventually, they'll be in jobs where they likely will need to interact with other human beings and talk about their problems and solve things. So I love that. However, I would ask you, what about the additional workload? So you mentioned that you now have live meetings or live office hours. One thing I hear from faculty is, yeah, these are all great strategies pedagogically or with andragogy, but this puts an additional workload on me. And now I have to free up all of this time for live synchronous one-on-one meetings, to listen to 25 hours of video diaries because I'm worried about the bot. So how do I manage that workload?
Well, first of all, with these help sessions, almost none of them will choose a one-to-one with me. So part of it is I want them to engage with the services that the college has to offer. I want them to talk to a librarian. I want them to go to a webinar on personal finance. I want them to go to a virtual talk with a historian, et cetera, et cetera. So that is kind of interesting because I think there's a power dynamic that it's not just the communication, but there's also like, oh, my professor, one to one. Oh no, scary. So that does offload the work in a way that I'm not taking away someone else's time. These are things that are already offered, right? And librarians love to
Yes.
talk to students. They're so happy when I send them to webinars, right? So that's part of it. In one particular class, I might have 32 students. I teach multiple classes. So you're right. I don't want to listen to 30 hours of interviews or video diaries or whatever it is. So really it's about having them turn in multiple pieces of this assignment and sort of taking a sample of each to make sure that they've met the requirements. And I like the idea of doing sort of 1 to 2 minute presentations so that you can watch 30 seconds of it if that's literally all the time that you have, and you can still get a good snapshot while you're looking at their research and you're looking at the other sort of preparatory tasks that they've undertaken to get to that point.
I love
So
sampling as a strategy. That's a great idea. You really do need about 2 minutes, right, to kind of figure out, is this a human? Are they on the right track? If you're a seasoned teacher like you and I are, then yes, I totally agree.
absolutely, because if you're in a face-to-face class, you don't want them to give 15-minute presentations either. There's no time for that. Not with 30 of them, not with 100 of them, however many are there are. So sampling, yeah, I think that's one of the good things we can do.
And then also, we don't talk about faculty using AI, right? Because just like students can use agentic AI to automate tasks, faculty are in fact, many of them are in fact using AI to grade and to simplify kind of rote tasks that they would do previously. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I think obviously there's some boundaries, right? If they're critical assessments, if they require human feedback, if they're highly personal or confidential in nature, or something's going on, you definitely need a human being in the mix. But if there's objective items that are not that important, or it's a formative assessment that they're just checking on a student and they want to use AI to grade that and they want to use their rubrics, that could potentially free up time for them to then do some of this other work that's a little bit more burdensome. So I think it's an exchange, and I try to avoid really having like a black and white answer about whether faculty should use AI for grading. I think they already are. And so how do we use that time freed up for more higher level work that they can do as a human being, as a professor, as an instructor?
Right. And we have to be flexible and we have to be adaptable, because as soon as we sort of figured one thing out, it'll all change. So,
Yes,
and
exactly.
that's why we have to be innovative, and we have to be changing the way that we do things all the time, but not in a way that's so overwhelming that we just want to throw everything out and just go back to writing our lecture notes on a lined notebook and using the same ones forever and just talking. So there is, of course, a balance. Okay, so you've talked about course sharing as an innovative way to remove barriers. What are some other ways we can remove barriers to college education for our students?
This is a big question. And part of my soapbox is talking about course sharing as a way to remove barriers, but also, like you said, are there other things colleges can do? Even if you're a small college, even if you're a big college, if you're a dean, if you're a faculty member, what sorts of things can you do? I have a whole laundry list of things that I've learned through my role about the student services side of the house that I wasn't previously in the know about when I was a faculty member. Really, I looked at students once they entered my class, and that was like a safe domain. That was my little bubble. I didn't know anything about transcripts or registration holds or fees or anything like that. When I oversaw the library, for example, at my previous role as a dean for 7 years, I realized that we had a collections agency for books that weren't being returned in a timely manner. And it was a very small threshold. It was like $50. If you were behind on fees for books not returned, they would send you to collections, which means that it would then hurt your credit. You couldn't buy a car in the future. It was a terrible idea. Or it would block you from getting your transcript from the college. That $50 could really haunt you for the rest of your life. So when I was there, we eliminated the collections agencies. Eventually, we also went to a no fee structure. What's the worst case? The students holding on to a book. Great. Like, how awful. Let them have the book. We can swallow that cost in most cases. These are not life-changing problems for us. Also, things like putting registration holds on students. So many students at every single institution have holds for very dumb reasons, in my opinion. They didn't pay a parking fee. They broke a beaker in a chemistry lab and didn't replace it for $25. They didn't return a helmet for an athletics class. Whatever it is, whatever the reason is, we love to put registration holds and prevent them from taking classes. It's a terrible practice. I really preach against things like registration holds for arbitrary reasons. Also, transcript holds. A student has paid all their fees, they've done all the things, but again, they might owe a small fee or they haven't turned in a form, and we don't release their transcripts. We don't let them turn it into an employer for job verification or for a transfer. These are very almost abusive practices that are major barriers for students that really put a terrible taste in their mouth. If I'm a student with any of these, I don't want to come back to the library and check out a book ever again. And I don't want to ever take another class at this college ever again. I've had a terrible experience where I've been blocked and I haven't had access to my records. So those are the kind of things, and I have maybe 15 more that I could go on about, but those are the kind of practices that I really encourage colleges to rethink and revise in light of student access and behaviors.
And institutionally, they're pretty easy to change. We're not talking
Very
about
easy.
overhauling systems. We're talking about simple changes that would make a big difference.
Yes.
I've heard you talk about how online education is part of decolonizing education. And I love that thought. Share a little story that I worked recently with an instructor who gave a really great lecture. It was about Black history and the history of African American film. And there were only a handful of students in this cohort, but it was in a big lecture hall and the lights were out, and she talked to them the whole time and showed some examples of film. it was interesting, but the students were not really engaged in the way that you would want them to be, right? So we had a chat about it afterwards, and she said, "Oh my gosh, that's like a colonial way of teaching that I was doing, and I'm so against that." And it was sort of an aha moment for her. So we brainstormed ways that she could make it more active, make it more interactive, and give the students some more power. And she was really excited about that. So, how do you think that online education can contribute to decolonizing education?
This is a packed question. I think it's the responsibility of all educators, not just online education, to decolonize. And what do we mean by that, right? It's sort of the traditional method of handling learning in a way that benefits a select few. And that really also presents almost a propagandized view of history and learning and various topics. I'm very, very sensitive to this personally, and now I'm just speaking for me personally, not for my system. I'm a Muslim woman, I'm an immigrant, I'm Asian American. I was born in Afghanistan. Right now, and even when I was a child, there's always this propaganda about how people are a certain way, who look like me, who come from my region of the world. Even today, we're in the midst of multiple wars in the Middle East. And there's a lot of propaganda, again, around it. Some of it's AI generated, some of it's real. The term fake news has been popularized by our president. So teaching our students to critically question and think about news and reality and events and history is a critical role for all of us. If we are to raise civically engaged, intelligent, active citizens of our countries, it's, I think, incumbent on all of us in online education and on campus and traditional modalities to help our students navigate this new reality. There's a new phrase that you may have heard about AI swarming. I don't know, have you heard of AI swarms?
No, haven't heard this.
Okay, so this just came on my radar. So it's when AI bots are deployed in multiple ways to make it look like there is consensus building around a topic. So let's say you're on Instagram or TikTok or your favorite social media or LinkedIn even, and someone posts a topic, let's say about the US war in Iran, okay? And the topic is, let's say, support or not in support of it. In the comments, there will be 100 different comments saying, yeah, I totally support this. You're so right. We love the president, whatever it is, or we hate the president, whatever the intent of that bot is. But all of them are generated by a number of different bots. So the AI is working together in multiple ways to make it look like there's a consensus or there is popular support for a topic. And again, this is very manipulative. This is social manipulation. It's a social propaganda. Teaching our students to navigate that, I think it's incumbent on us. This is the future. When our opinions are being manipulated, when the news are being manipulated by all sides, what is the reality? How do we differentiate reality? How do we verify sources? Teaching our students to navigate and understand and critically engage, I think, is going to be the next frontier for educators.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Marina. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you very much, Lauran. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to From College to College. If you found today's episode valuable, please subscribe. To get my free newsletter and access all resources mentioned today, head to the show notes. You can also visit my website to learn more about speaking engagements, coaching, and executive function support. And if you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to rate and review. This makes a huge difference in helping others discover it. Cheers, y'all!